Now, most of us have to go back in time for this, but I want you to try to remember when you were early stages of getting into the workforce, especially when you were young, like a teenager. I remember this, and this was a standard thing that you did. It was recommended, and you were told to get recommendation or reference letters. Especially now, if you'd had a previous job, you get a recommendation or a reference letter from your previous employer. But if not, your parents encourage you to get a reference letter, like let's say from friends of your parents, or from your banker, if you had a bank account, or from your pastor or priest. And it's something that you attach to your application when you applied for a job when you were young. I did it. I don't think it's done anymore. I don't think it's done that much anymore. But it is a common practice, of course, today to get references. Of course, it's on applications. It's pretty standard. And actually, it's widely done in business. The other day, I had to do an application for another vendor, and I had to give references on it. I'm just glad of one thing, because basically, when you get these reference letters, you're really hoping that they give a flowery description of your character, your outstanding character, and your work ethic. But today, they can research your character online on social media. You cannot lie today, because they can research it and they can find it out. And I'm just really, really happy that smartphones with cameras weren't around when I was growing up. There is no evidence of me growing up at all, which is good. Now, I've stated this before, and I want to encourage you again this week to read verses in or the chapters prior and after our readings for every Sunday. Because what they can do, they can broaden the picture and give us a deeper meaning. But what the Holy Spirit, through our church fathers, want to tell us on any given Sunday. I say this because it is God's holy written word. Written. God does speak to us through the Holy Scriptures. We may not hear his voice, but he does reach out to us through the Holy Scriptures. He gives us comfort, and he does give his wisdom in the Holy Bible. Now, the backstory on our epistle reading today is pretty important. It's because St. Paul is writing with both joy and continued rebuke to the church in Corinth. The first epistle, his first letter to them, was pretty brutal. I mean, it was a serious talking to for many reasons, but one in particular was the Corinthians were starting to be swayed by the Judaizers, and Paul was having to battle the heresy of the Judaizers, which we all know was loyalty to the Jewish law. And he was battling it with true belief and reliance on the true gospel of Christ. That's what he preached. A gospel that Paul sacrificed a lot to deliver to them. Now, this was a crucial and dangerous time for Christ's early Catholic Church. She was being attacked from all sides, and Paul's frustration was at a boiling point. The Judaizer preachers were continually denying Paul's authority. And what they were really doing is they were actually traveling to cities after he had visited them and tried to pursue their converts after he left, accusing Paul of having personal gain. They said he was keeping the money or making money off of raising for the persecuted Christians and the poor in Jerusalem. And worst of all, they were accusing him of betraying God's chosen people, the Jews, by preaching a gospel to the Gentiles without any reference to Jewish law. And to try to validate their authority in this argument, strongly believed, and it is quite logical, that in this process, the Judaizers, as they went from town to town, would produce to the church leaders, to the priests, the presbyters, letters of commendation from, let's say, scholars of the law in Palestine. Probably a lot of them were written themselves. Commendations that were written by man, but what they were trying to do is substantiate their authority and subvert Paul's authority. Our beloved St. Paul was having none of it. And he simply told them the truth. The truth that no man could write. His letter of commendation. His letter was not written in ink, but it was written by God himself. And God alone had written his letter of commendation in the hearts of the Corinthians themselves. They were living proof in the gospel. They were living proof of his authority. And it was none of his doing. He's very plain about it. None of his doing. It was God's, and God's alone. They were the living proof. He's very clear that God was using him as an instrument of Christ, and that his personal ability had nothing to do with it. That it was God and God, only God of all things that were Christ. Paul's letter of commendation is simply this. They were the brothers and sisters, the Jew and the Gentile, that he had shown the path of salvation through Jesus Christ. And he had evidence. No one who encountered the converted Christians in Corinth could fail to see the supernatural change in them by them accepting the gospel and the new covenant. And Paul even asserts that in his confidence in his ministry, it is not of his own abilities or reputation that he'd acquired, because he'd gotten quite a reputation as he went on his ministry. It was solely from the crucified and resurrected Christ that his ministry bore fruit. It wasn't him. It bore fruit because he preached the gospel to both the Jew and the Gentile. Paul asserts that the new covenant of life is written and dwells in the hearts of all those who are baptized. The incarnation, birth, and sacrifice of the living God Christ fulfilled the old covenant of condemnation and death. He fulfilled the law on the cross, and by his resurrection and his ascension, the Holy Spirit brought forth a glorious new covenant of life. In our epistle reading today, he refers to the law given to Moses. Now, the law given to Moses on the mountain was the revelation of God's glory, a revelation to the people. And that glory also shone on Moses' face because he was in the presence of God when he came down from the mountain. His face shone, and it shone with such glory that the people were afraid to approach it. But Paul points out that that splendor, that glory that was shining in Moses' face began to fade, and it did fade, and he is making reference that also the law was fading, and it was being replaced by the glory and splendor of the gospel. See, the law had developed into a legal system of condemnation, but the gospel was a calling. The gospel was a summons to salvation and everlasting life. The questions we have to ask ourselves, the questions that we need to take home with us today, is pretty simple. First, are our letters of commendation our true reference letters? Are they written in ink? Are they written of this world? Or are they written by God through us on the hearts of people we've encountered in our life? We have to ask ourselves, are we confident in our own love for Christ and our knowledge that God is the author of all good things in this world? Are our commendation letters, are they a legacy of worldly things or a legacy of a righteous life? Something that's not read, but it's seen, not just in us, but seen in the people around us. Are we doing our best, big or small, grand or small? Are we doing our best, boldly or quietly? And there is no wrong way to do it. Are we doing our best to bring others into a life with Christ in their hearts? Either if we do it with a bullhorn, a charitable gesture, or even a simple God bless you, they can all equally be effective. Have we surrendered ourselves to Christ completely so that our own confidence and our perpetual and personal discipleship can be seen by others and in others? Simply, are our commendation letters also written in the hearts of others? If we ask ourselves that question, we want to answer it. We hope so. But probably more than we realize. But we can always do better. And we must do better. Because unfortunately, dearly beloved, it seems another critical and dangerous time for Christ Catholic Church. She once again is being attacked by all sides, and in most cases from within, which we've noticed recently. This is a progressively selfish world that we live in. We all have to do better, especially me. I'm a priest, for goodness sakes. Part of my vow that I took when I was ordained was to save lost souls in this world. I have to do better. Being a priest is not just 1 hour every Sunday, but neither is being a disciple of Christ, sitting in the pews 1 hour every Sunday. We must try to change the hearts as often as the opportunity arises. Try to get people to hear the calling of Christ's church and let the church, so the church can help lead people to life. And lead a life, actually, as the Archdeacon said, lead a life under the expectations of God and not just want more of man's laws, because that's what they're doing. They want more of man's laws. Part of our society today has recently evolved to believe that man knows what is right and wrong better than God does. Just because it's legal doesn't make it right. Are we going to get it right every time? No. Are we going to fail? Yeah, we'll fail sometimes, probably more often than not. But when it comes to our time to stand before God, to answer for our time in this world, I will tell you this. I would rather be standing before God with commendations in just a few hearts and more failures, but not for the lack of trying. I don't want to be standing there holding commendations from this world written in the ink of my sinful and selfish nature. Dearly beloved, we must try harder. We have to do better. Amen.
Amen.
Remember the words of our Lord Jesus, how he said, it is more blessed to give